In this video, we're going to be building this procedural alien egg sac shader material in Blender. This material is built to be super customizable to produce a bunch of different sci-fi organic looks for things like clusters of alien eggs, organic growths, and sci-fi organisms. I made two versions of this tutorial. This video is the fast lightning version, where we're going to run down all of the essential steps in 10 minutes. If you prefer something slower paced, I have a longer version of this tutorial where we go through it more methodically in real time, and I explain the underlying principles as we go. This tutorial is really going to be targeted towards intermediate level users who already have some experience with shader nodes. If you're new to Blender or procedural materials, this might be a slightly overwhelming place to start. I'm going to be using Blender 4.0 for this tutorial. The material that we're making today is available for free with the full node network on our Blender Market page. The link is in the description. Alright, let's get started. Create a new scene with the default cube. Keep the default cube. Change your render engine to cycles and set the device to GPU if you have one. Open a shader window. Use a free HDRI from Polyhaven to light the scene. Set the film to transparent in the render settings so you have the lighting info from the HDRI. Add a subdivision modifier to the cube with 6 levels of subdivision. Add a cast modifier to the sphere, set the factor to 1, and apply the modifiers. Make sure to have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. Let's start with the big shapes. Use a Voronoi texture to create the egg shape. Send it to a color ramp node to flip the levels between black and white. Send the flipped Voronoi texture to a displacement node in the height input. You'll see that the displacement looks flat. Change the surface displacement type from bump to displacement and bump. Scale the magnitude of the displacement with the multiply math node before the displacement node. Remove the pointiness of the displacement by shaping the Voronoi texture with a float curve node. Set the output of the float curve node to also go into the color node of the principled BSDF. You can adjust the scale of the Voronoi texture to alter how frequently the egg pattern repeats. Use a math power node to further control the shape. Values of the exponent less than 1 make the shape flatter, higher than 1 make it sharper. Group the nodes into a node group by hitting Ctrl G to provide a simple interface for controlling the parameters. Connect the vector, Voronoi scale, and Voronoi noise randomness and power function exponent into the group input node. Make sure to name the group input something meaningful so you know what they do. Now we need to add color variation of the egg to make the grooves and the peaks different colors. Use the Voronoi texture mask and use it as a factor in the mix color node. Set the top color to be the color of the grooves and the bottom color to be the color of the peaks of the eggs. Connect the color result to the principled BSDF. Make sure the mesh is set to shade smooth if you're seeing shading artifacts. You can adjust the roughness and clear coat in the principled BSDF to make the material look wetter. Adjust the subsurface scattering to give a more organic, flesh-like look. Drop a math power node between the float curve node and the mix color node, and use the exponent as a tuning parameter for the groove color width. Connect the exponent to the group input. Now let's add the veins. Use Ctrl J to join nodes that are associated with common features into a frame for organization. Let's put the egg pattern nodes into their own frame. Use the Musgrave texture for the vein pattern. In Blender 4.1 and later, the Musgrave texture is now part of the noise texture. Use the ridged multifractal texture type to get a more veiny pattern. Use a color ramp node to flip the black and white levels of the Musgrave texture. Make the veins thinner by using a map range node and set the from minimum value to something just barely less than 1, like 0.95. Let's use this texture to drive the displacement. Use a math add node to add the height from the Voronoi eggs with the veins texture and plug the output into the height input of the displacement node. Add a math multiply node between the vein texture and the math add node to scale down the vein displacement. Now we can independently control the displacement of the eggs and the veins. Connect the Musgrave texture, vector, scale, and displacement modifier to the group input node so you can easily modify these later. Do the same with the egg displacement multiplicative modifier. Now let's adjust the colors of the veins. Add in a mixed color node after the color node for the eggs and the grooves. Connect the vein texture map from the map range node to the mixed color factor and set the vein color to be the bottom color. If you want control over the vein color opacity, drop a math multiply node between the map range node and the mixed color node. Connect the value that is multiplied into the group input as the vein opacity. Make it a little easier to control the thickness. Use a math subtract node and set it to 1 minus whatever you want the thickness to be, like 0.05. Plug the output of that into the from minimum node of the vein map range node. Connect the bottom value in the subtract node to your group input for an easy vein control. We're still not there. Let's add in some more high frequency details to create a more organic and believable look. Remember to use Ctrl J to frame your nodes. Group up the nodes that are being used for the veins so you can remember when you come back later. Let's add some high frequency bumps. Use a noise texture and increase the scale to around 50. Drop a math node right in front of the displacement node height input. Use it to add the bumpy noise displacement into the vein and egg displacement. Make sure to use a math multiply node to scale the output of the noise texture before the add node to decrease the strength of the displacement. We're still not where we want to be. Let's add some color variation into the eggs. Create a noise texture node and a mixed color node. Set the two colors you want the eggs to contain. Use the factor of the noise texture to blend between the two colors of the eggs. Send the output of the mixed color node into the color where the previous egg color was set. If you want some more control, add a brightness contrast node in after the noise texture node. Now you can use the contrast value to adjust the control of the color variation. We're almost there. Let's just expose all the parameters that we want to control through our node group. Make sure all of the colors have their own group inputs. Don't forget to give them meaningful names. All of your noise textures should have their vector input connected to the vector group input. Also, make sure you have a separate group input for every texture scale. If you want to be able to choose between scaling all textures simultaneously versus independently, you can add a global scale input and add a math multiply node to multiply the global scale by each individual texture scale before it gets piped into the scale input of the noise texture node. It's also useful to control some of the parameters of the final principled BSDF node. The roughness, clear coat weight, and roughness, subsurface weight, and scale are all super useful parameters. You can also pipe the final color mix node into the group output. Now you have the color information of the shader as an output that you can use if you want to plug it into another shader type. Now we've got a material with a bunch of independently adjustable parameters to control the look. Okay, but what if we don't like the position of the noise texture on our mesh? First, connect the vector input of our shader group to a texture coordinate and mapping node. Make sure that you're using the generated coordinates from the texture coordinate. You can use the location of the mapping node to globally adjust the position of the texture simultaneously, but you can also get even more control. Dive into the node group and change each of the noise textures inside the node group to be 4D instead of 3D. Now we have a new W parameter that controls the coordinate of the texture. Connect that W parameter to a new group input for each noise texture, and now you can independently control the position of every texture on your mesh. Subsurface scattering is a huge part of organic flesh-like materials. Changing the subsurface scattering type in the principled BSDF node from random walk to random walk skin can have a huge impact on the look of the material. Play around with it and see what works for you. You can get even more customization though. Duplicate the node group and create two different presets of the material with different color and scale values. Now you can blend these presets together using a mixed shader node for the BSDF outputs and a mixed vector node for the displacement outputs. Drive the mixed node factor with a constant value or noise texture to blend between the presets. Alright, that's everything for this quick tutorial. If that was a little fast for you, please check out the longer, slower version of the tutorial where I walk through this at a casual, real-time pace and explain the reasoning behind everything in more detail. The alien egg material is available for free on our Blender market page, and if you want even more procedural organic materials like this, you can also purchase our Principled Organic Materials product pack that has 7 different procedural organic materials, including this egg material we built today. The link for both of those is in the description, and please let us know if you're having any issues or if you'd like some more tutorials on these types of shaders.